Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Hello.
How's it going today, Austin? How you making out?
Oh, well, how about with you?
Oh, not too bad. Just living life and taking it day by day. It seems like we, unfortunately, are going to be hitting a pretty bad week here as far as the coronavirus in our state seems to go.
Yep, we're supposed to, I don't know how accurate it is, but supposedly we're hitting the peak this week. So, I mean, in a way, that's a bad thing. In a way, it's a good thing. It means the curve is actually flattening. So, I mean, it's still bad.
It's been tough, but keep up the good work, people, and continue to social distance. I've seen far less people out than I have previously the last couple weeks, so keep it up. We're far from done, but it seems to be starting to work, so that's obviously the good news. And obviously the climate we're in right now, I felt like it was appropriate to bring that up just because it's important to remind people just how crucial it is to continue to listen to our top health officials as we battle this virus. But in the meantime, the NFL draft is still going to occur this month. And with that being the case, we have some work to do, Austin. So today we're going to be looking at edge defenders. Let's just jump right into it. The biggest story for the Steelers this entire offseason centered around the way they were going to keep Bud Dupree. And obviously, things were very good for the Steelers when the CBA was passed last month. It allowed for the Steelers to have a much easier time to keep Bud Dupree and tag him and massage the cap the way they need to. Because without the CBA passing, there was that 30% rule in place where you could only restructure 30% going into the next season. So that meant that guys like Ben Roethlisberger, you could restructure now up to, I think it was like $9 million. So the Steelers were able to massage the cap because of this and were able to sign guys like Eric Ebron. So on top of that, they were obviously able to keep Bud Dupree. So bringing him back on the one-year franchise tag is obviously pretty big. And at just under $16 million, that seems like a good place to start contract negotiations for a long-term deal.
$60 million would be a good place. I would hope his annual average value will be somewhere like 16.5. I hope it doesn't top like 18 or anything like that, because that'd be a lot to pay for Bud Dupree after one breakout season. But I mean, I'm still willing to pay him top edge rusher money.
It'll be difficult to tell just because the Steelers do have to worry about T.J. Watt as well, who is going to be entering the final year of his original rookie year contract. He does have the fifth-year option that was exercised by the team, but I find it hard to believe the Steelers would not extend him at that point. So be on the lookout for that following this upcoming season. But for now, Dupree's the guy making some real money, and then three other guys on the back end of the roster, including Ola Adeniyi and Tuzar Skipper. Skipper's on a 2-year deal, and Adeniyi is on a 1-year deal. And they also have Christian Kuntz, who's listed as a linebacker. I don't know if you remember, he actually had a sack in the preseason finale last season, so he was an edge rusher previously, but he's also a long snapper too, so that's kind of interesting. But he's also on the squad as well. But just 5 edge defenders right now, so it makes you think that there's still more positions or players to add at this position group.
There's room. I feel like there's a lot of inexperience behind Bud and T.J. Watt. I mean, you want to hope that your two big guys aren't going to go down, but I mean, if Bud Dupree or T.J. Watt, God forbid, got hurt, like, it's not going to look good with Adeniyi and Skipper. I mean, they opted to cut Skipper for Holton last year, and you saw how Holton played. And, I mean, they still opted to use Chicolo on pass rushing snaps rather than Adeniyi. So I don't even think the team thinks that high of Adeniyi as much as I do. I thought Adeniyi is going to be a breakout stud as a backup, but, I mean, I don't get that same feeling that the team feels the same way. So, I mean, I think that there's room to add here. I think there's room to improve. That being said, you're not going to get more experience at this point. You're not going to get a vet more than likely. I mean, Colbert said he's done with free agency for the most part, besides maybe a few more XFL signings. But what you can get is possible improvements. I mean, you can draft an edge rusher if you think that they're going to be better than Skipper or Adaney, and I think that it's possible that they do take one in this draft.
Well, and on top of that, you talk about Anthony Chickillo, who is, by the way, still a free agent. I'm not sure if the Steelers would be interested in possibly bringing him back for something like the veteran minimum. He is still out there. He's been a free agent for almost a month now.
Later down the line, I mean, the price that they were paying him was just way too much. But I mean, if he wants to come back for the veteran minimum or something, I wouldn't be against it. I'm sure after, I forget what point comp picks aren't factored in anymore. I mean, he's probably going to be below that anyway, but I'm sure he'll sign like right after, like nothing counts against you for the comp picks and stuff.
Chickillo was a guy that, you're right, was that third outside linebacker because the team trusted him. So we've had back-to-back camp stars on the team, and Adaney and Skipper, and neither of them have really broken out. Adaney was the guy you mentioned we really had our eyes on, even though Skipper had the biggest preseason that we've ever seen last year. He obviously was still someone that the Steelers saw cuttable. So is there do you still hold out hope for either of these guys? Is there a chance either of them could play significant snaps? Because even though Dupree and Watt are top-end guys, they're both either in their prime or hitting their prime, they can play a lot of snaps. There's still going to have to be a guy that can come off the bench at least to play some significant snaps.
I still have faith in Adaney. I feel like I've seen enough consistency that I have faith in him. Again, though, I don't get that same feeling from the team. I think that I value Adaney way more than the Steelers organization do. Skipper, I'm not as confident. I mean, again, his preseason was insane. I just didn't want to let him go. But like, I feel like I haven't seen as much from him to convince me. That,
well, he's only been there for
Adaney.
He's only been there for 1 year. That's the thing.
Exactly, and it was like half a year because he wasn't even with the team for them. With the Giants, he didn't really do much, so that does just kind of bring me back to reality a little bit. That preseason doesn't really always transition, but I still think there's a possibility. I'm not saying that he's 100% a bust, just a preseason guy, but I just have more faith in Ola right now.
So if the Steelers are using a draft pick, where could you see an edge rusher being taken? Could you see it early? Could you see it late? Could you see it anywhere?
I can see it anywhere. I think that at this point, the Steelers are always really good at covering their holes. They have basically every hole covered besides possibly guard. I think I'd say guard is like the biggest thing, and they have covered that too. It's not even like they didn't. It's just that's the one that I think is going to be the most easily replaced.
You mean
But
like
I mean,
start? You mean like
yeah.
at the starting position, like the starting guard? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Because Wisniewski, he's got it right now. Him and Matt Filer are going to fight for it, but regardless. That, to me, seems like the spot where you could draft a guard, assuming Filer stays at right tackle, and then you have a guy for after Wisniewski. But here it's the same thing. There's no guarantee Bud Dupree will stay around. I mean, you could franchise tag him again, but we saw that process with Le'Veon Bell. That gets expensive real quick, and it's different with an edge rusher than a running back.
It's a lot more expensive.
A lot more, yeah. It's going to be ridiculous money, and at that point, I wouldn't be able to tell you guys right now what the second tag would be for Bud Dupree, but it would not be. It would basically be like, well, you might as well go get a top priority edge rusher from free agency if you're going to pay that, because I mean you could get someone else for that money, but regardless, it's just not going to be worth it. And so now you're going to be losing Bud Dupree next year, which would make it tough. You need to. I mean, edge would be your highest priority unless you fell in love with how Ola Adaney or Tuzar Skipper played. That you didn't feel like trying to win. But that's why I think that here you could take one in the second round if you wanted. I'm not exactly for that, but it's possible.
I actually think you could make an argument that, because when you were talking about holes, I thought you were just talking about on the roster. I think you could make an argument that besides maybe backup safety, I think backup edge rusher might be the biggest current hole.
I was leaning towards backup inside linebacker too. I feel like
That's true.
Vince and Devin Bush.
That's true. There's
pretty big hole
also
as well.
because you also lost Matakevich, so there's more to that as well.
But I mean, they have confidence in Spillane and Ulysses S. Gilbert, so that's a story for another day. But yeah, there's And there's a bunch of holes of depth, really.
They
here.
covered their big holes, but there's still other spots that could be depth pieces, like you said, that could be added, and this is one of them.
Easily, yeah.
So, that being the case, there's 8 different men that we've taken a look at. As far as a brief overview of the guys I looked at, Austin, I didn't really look at any top-level guys. I looked at a couple mid-level and a couple lower-level guys, and overall, just looking at them, I generally liked what I saw from all of them, but when you're looking at guys that aren't top-level edge rushers, there's going to be holes in their game. I saw kind of an interesting range between Alex Highsmith from Charlotte and Kendall Coleman from Syracuse, where Highsmith is a very good athlete, but not a very good technical player. So kind of a high ceiling, low floor guy, while Coleman, on the other hand, is a low ceiling, high floor guy who's a very good hard worker, a good technician, but not very talented. So I saw a pretty good array of guys in this year's draft class, and I liked what I saw.
Yeah, I looked at one top heavy guy, like a second rounder, and then the rest were mostly mid round to and then I had 2 mid round and then 1 late. So overall, I got a nice mix of players this year. Unfortunately, I didn't like a lot of them, but it happens.
So why don't we start with kind of our top tier guys then, at least the guys that are probably thought of as the highest ranked players. In that case, who do you want to start with?
Start with Zach Bond. Zach Bond from Wisconsin. He's a junior. He's 6'2" and 238 pounds. I recently saw him knocked in the first round to the Green Bay Packers, which was interesting. I don't know what it is with Wisconsin's program, but as soon as I read Bond's profile, I thought of T.J. Edwards. T.J. Edwards, if you guys don't remember, was a middle linebacker drafted from Wisconsin last year. I believe he went to the Eagles. This is because both Edwards and Bond came out of high school as quarterbacks, but both, for some reason, Wisconsin made them linebackers. So I don't know why Wisconsin does that, but it's interesting nonetheless. And as soon as I saw it again, I was like, damn, they just take quarterbacks and make them all linebackers. But anyway, back to Bond. Coming out of high school, he won Wisconsin's Offensive Player of the Year award as a senior for his dual threat abilities, having over 3,700 scrimmage yards and 59 touchdowns in his senior year. He decided to stay in his home state and was immediately converted to a linebacker, playing as a reserve with 15 tackles and 3.5 of those being for a loss in 12 games. Unfortunately, Bond missed 2017 with a foot injury, but he was able to come alive in his 2018 season where he got to start all 13 games, totaling 63 tackles, 7.5 for a loss, 2.5 sacks, and an interception. If 2018 was coming alive, 2019 was transcending life. He got 76 tackles, with 19.5 of those being for a loss, 12.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles, and an interception, which was good enough to earn him first-team All-Big Ten honors and second-team Associated Press All-American. While he still technically had eligibility as he was a redshirt freshman in his first season, he decided to enter the draft after his best season earnings, after he earned second-team All-American. So what I liked about him, I really liked his versatility. In the NFL, there's an increasing axe to have to do everything if you want to be on the field. And what I saw is that Bond could play both sides as a pass rusher while also being able to drop back into coverage and drop back into coverage effectively. I felt like his drops were very smooth for a linebacker, and he plays with his hips fluid to be able to cover more area in zone. He also has enough athleticism to be able to cover both running backs out of the backfield and tight ends in space because of it. And one thing I noticed that he's good at tricking opponents into thinking he's pass rushing with a convincing one step and then dropping back. It's what led to his pick 6 against Illinois. Then there's a lot of areas where he is quick. He has a quick lateral slide to be able to close running lanes from the backside. He has a quick get-off speed to be able to create disruption in the backfield. Dangerous burst and bend that was put on display in the game against USF. And quick hands to be able to punch and play around blocks. Speaking of his punch, he throws out some nasty strikes, and you could see this on display in the game against Ohio State. Then as a tackler, he has a solid range and speed to be able to go and get his assignment while also having the agility and suddenness to expand his reach as an open field tackler. Last thing is he is flexible and strong enough to maintain balance through contact. So going to the negatives, the first thing I thought of when I saw his size and then saw him on tape for the first time is that he lacks the size you want out of an NFL pass rusher. More like a safety, especially with his coverage skills. And I fear that adding size will slow him down. And while his speed isn't bad right now, it's middle of the pack for this class. It feels like it would be a lateral move if he loses speed in the process of putting on weight. Then I felt like watching his tape, he didn't have a lot of pass rushing tools and relied a lot on his athleticism. And with his size being smaller and his combine performance being middle of the pack, there's no way he'll be able to rely on just athleticism on the NFL level. If he does what he did in college or make it obvious his intention with his pre-snap setup of feet, he definitely will need to mask him more at the next level. And also, with that said, his rush counters felt very mechanical. Also, when pass rushing, he really struggled against tackles with longer arms, offensive tackles that I'm talking about, and could get pushed up and around the arc sometimes. Then something I noticed on tape is for a guy his strength, I felt like his tackling needed more power behind it, especially in the open field. Last few things are that his antsiness has caused him to stutter coming out of the ball. Sometimes he has shown panic when face guarding down the field. He has taken some bad pursuit angles as a tackler. So overall, Lance Zierlein has compared him to Kyle Van Noy, and that's a good comparison based on how they play. Van Noy is a little bigger and slower, but how they play is very similar. I feel like Baughn's pass rushing skills could match Van Noy's, where he averages like 5 sacks on the year, but excels in other places. Anyhow, with that being said, I think Braun is a second rounder, but I had a tough time getting a read. He is still small in size, and there's a lot to work with his pass rushing, but he also flashes at times with his athletic abilities. Braun could be a third rounder, though, depending on how other teams value him, but there aren't a lot of pass rushers in this draft, so again, I think Braun's going to go in round 2. So that was Zach Braun from Wisconsin, and I watched his games versus Michigan State, versus Illinois, and versus USF in 2019, as well as his highlights. Who is your first prospect that you want to talk about?
So my top level guy, the top tier guy, is Alex Highsmith from Charlotte. So Charlotte is the 49ers just recently became an FBS school. I didn't realize they were even an FBS school up until this past season. But, a smaller school. He walked onto the team in 2015 and made the team. He was mostly reserve his redshirt freshman season, started 1 game and played 12. Then he finally earned a scholarship in 2017 and doubled his tackle output nearly from 77 to 33 and added 2 sacks. Became an All-Conference USA player in 2018 with 60 tackles, 17 and a half of them for loss, 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. And then he was first-team All-Conference USA again this past season and a third-team All-American with 14 sacks and 75 tackles and 13 starts with a school record 21 and a half tackles for loss. He showed fantastic maturation and development over his final 2 seasons. That's the big thing that you look at when it's just a pure number standpoint with Highsmith. And the big thing with him, as I kind of mentioned earlier, is that he's extremely athletic. The most athletic of the players I looked at as far as the edge rushers go. He's got a primary move that's kind of like a Euro step, and for those who don't know, that's kind of like a wide move to one side and then a kind of a step to the other side. And his counter is kind of a quick spin move to the inside off of that Euro step. So the big thing when you're a pass rusher is having 2 developed moves. You want one primary move and then a counter off of that, and he has that. He's a pretty good run defender on the edge. He can bend a play back inside. He's got pretty good patience. And when needed, he can be aggressive and can charge into the backfield quickly with his good athleticism. Again, that athleticism shows up with good short area quickness. He's able to track down the ball carrier and can track down pocket quarterbacks really easily. And again, the athleticism is really just a kind of a theme here. He can get up and knock balls down and can make diving efforts at the ball carrier. And also something I forgot to mention with these guys, all 4 of these players that I looked at were at the East-West Shrine Bowl. I remembered all their names, and I looked at all 4 of the college all-star games, the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, the Hula Bowl, and the NFLPA Bowl. And I remembered all 4 of the guys' names, but I didn't realize they were all from the same game. So I guess I just really liked the way they all played. I guess I was just looking at edge rushers in that game, but he did play well in that game, I thought. So I decided to take a look at him here. And so those were some of the things that I thought he did. He showed showed off well in and does a good job with. As far as the negatives go, Highsmith is lacking a bit in both upper and lower body strength, so he's not that strong at the point of attack, and too often kind of like what Austin was just talking about with his first prospect, is that he'll be sent around the outside when rushing on the edge, kind of just tossed up the arc. He relies on that athleticism too much, even though he does have pass rushing moves. They're not very refined. His hand fighting is not his strong suit at this point. He'll lose battles with technically sound offensive tackles, and he opens himself up to an offensive lineman's punch too often. He gets knocked off base really easily, and he leaves his feet way too often when tackling because he's not as strong as he needs to be. He tries to use his weight to bring the ball carrier down. And he does. What I noticed on tape, this is a big thing, is that he doesn't keep his shoulders square. I saw from his draft profile that he seems to have square shoulders. That's not what I saw on tape. He really doesn't. Not from the games I saw, anyways. Also, it's important to mention that he did have good stats this year, but he also played games against two really bad offensive lines, including an FCS school in Gardner-Webb and Old Dominion. So that allowed him to pad his stats a bit. And he really didn't show anything good against Clemson, which is great competition, but you're looking for more when you're going to be facing NFL talent. He did have a nice few reps and an effort sack, and it's worth noting that he received praise from Clemson tackle Jackson Carman, who he went up against, and Coach Dabo Sweeney after the game, but I didn't think he played all that well. And he showed very little to me against Buffalo in the Bahamas Bowl, the most recent college game he played. And while Buffalo did seem to run a game plan designed to negate him, it doesn't change my mind that he was pretty disappointing in that game. So, all in all, Alex Highsmith was a pretty mixed bag from what I saw. The tape I saw was pretty disappointing, but I saw a pretty small sample size. His All-Star game performance was good. I remember liking that. He's a very good athlete that developed well as a former walk-on. How much further he can grow, though, remains to be seen. He relied on that athleticism almost totally in college, and he got more efficient with it as time went on, but he's not a good fundamentals player. And when projecting to the NFL, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that athleticism is only going to get him so far. When you couple that with relatively shorter arms, I think it's going to be up to Highsmith in terms of how well he trains and gets coached to become a regular or starter. He needs to add more bulk and become more of a technician. Right now, he's a backup edge defender, but he has the potential to become a solid rotational rusher on passing downs. I think that there is a place for him in the league, but he's not going to be a guy that plays right away, at least not in my opinion. Not a lot, anyhow. I think Highsmith is going to be a day 2 pick, probably late second, early third round. So that was Alex Highsmith from Charlotte. We're moving on to the mid-tier guys now. Who are you looking at the mid-tier?
Let me start with Darrell Taylor. He's from Tennessee. He's a senior. He's 6'4" and 267 pounds. He came out of Virginia as a 4-star recruit and second-team All-State pick, but for some reason came out late in his time in Tennessee. He redshirted his first year and was only able to get 9 tackles with 1 for a loss through 8 games the following year. However, in 2017, he started to flash a little, starting 7 of 10 games at defensive end, having 27 tackles, 4 being for a loss, 3 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. In 2018, he led the Vols in tackles for a loss with 11 on his 36 total tackles, and then he also had 8 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. In 2019, he once again led the Vols in tackles for a loss with 10, 8.5 of those being sacks, 46 total tackles, and 4 pass breakups through 13 starts at linebacker. Following the season, he got surgery for a stress fracture in his foot, which caused him to miss the combine, but he's expected to be ready for the NFL season once he gets drafted. So, starting out with his play, let's start with his negatives. I always start with the positives, so let's do negatives first. Concerns with his demeanor and character. He had reportedly kicked a teammate in the face during a fight in practice in 2017 that led him to getting suspended, which is never great. Then something I noticed with this play was that he would stay put as the edge setter rather than trying to get off his block and look to tackle a running back. The effort against the run didn't feel the same as his effort as a pass rusher. Then I felt like he had some acceleration issues. There were a few times I noticed just slow off the ball, and even once against Florida, he wasn't even fast enough to get set, and it messed up his entire rep. Then this lack of acceleration he has makes it harder for him to be a bull rusher, and also his lack of acceleration combined with his slow processing makes him look really slow when switching from run to pass against play action. Then I felt like he wasn't good enough with the usage of his hands other than getting the strong punch. He struggled resetting his hands to take on secondary blocks, and he's not skilled enough to use them to whip the blocker in front of him. Last thing for the negatives is that he doesn't have a true go-to rush move or counter, so that's something that he should learn once he gets to the NFL. Starting with his toughness, I watched his tape for 2019 before researching why he didn't participate in the Combine and was already pretty impressed. And then I found out he played the entire 2019 season with a stress fracture in his foot, and it blew my mind. Not only did he play the entire season for a team going nowhere, he played effectively and so much that Georgia felt like they needed to double block him. It makes sense, though. He has both the body and size for the NFL, and on tape his play strength was great, which again is why he demanded double coverage at times. I wish he participated in the bench press. I'm not sure why he didn't. He was at the Combine for, like, interviews and stuff, but and I feel like he could have done the bench press. You don't really need your legs for that, but whatever. That's just nitpicky. I think he would have been a top performer because of the way he was able to hold his own against top-tier SEC tackles, but I guess we'll never know. It may just be a facade, though, because of his balance and his base and his use of the hands, because he typically initiates contact, and he's got a nice heavy punch. He also has pretty nice extend and sink abilities as well. Continuing with his pass rush, he has shown quite the ability to be able to bend and dip at the top of the rush and corners and flatten sharply around the turn. Then when he gets there, he's always looking for the strip sack, which is why in his last 3 years at Tennessee, he was able to force 6 fumbles. Then I was impressed with his range. Others have just called it adequate, but from the tape I saw, he was able to get his hands into throwing lanes and also reach around offensive tackles to make some nice tackles. So I was impressed with his length. So overall, a lot of people have him going in the 4th round. Then there are a few saying he will go in the 5th or the 3rd. Personally, I think he'll go in the 3rd, but I gave him a 2nd-round grade. His tape was fantastic. There were a lot of things I liked, and I think I could claim him to be my first draft love. I see a lot of value, especially if he falls into the 5th round. And I'll put it this way, I had the same feeling for DeAndre Walker when I gave him a 2nd-round grade, which admittedly I did like Walker more, and Walker ended up falling all the way to the 5th round. So with character concerns and injury that could keep him out of camp, and some unhoned skills, I could easily see him fall. And also not a lot of... he hasn't been a starter for very long. He only got really 2 seasons as a starter, and only 1 was super effective. But anyway, Landon Sirloin compared him to Junior Gillette, which I don't really see. I guess the comparison is that they both got suspended in college and were outside linebackers. But their size and play style, to me, isn't really comparable. But, hey, if he could put together a career like Gillette's, minus the suspensions and season-ending injuries, that would be a fantastic career. Gillette had a total of 22 sacks in both 2013 and 2014 combined before getting super injured. But regardless, this was Darrell Taylor out of Tennessee. I watched his highlights. I watched versus Georgia, versus BYU, and versus Florida in 2019. Who is your next prospect that you would like to talk about?
I forgot to mention, I know I had said it before, but officially I looked at Alex Highsmith's Shrine Bowl performance and his games against Clemson and Buffalo this past season. So my second prospect, who is just, in my opinion, a tier below Highsmith, is Derek Tuszka from North Dakota State, a redshirt senior at 6'4" and 251 pounds. I mentioned Kendall Coleman being the technician that's not athletic, and Highsmith is the athletic non-technician type of player. Tuszka's kind of a hybrid between them. So he's talented, but also a bit of a technician too, but not overly great at either or. So Tuszka comes from South Dakota. He was an all-state high school football player, redshirted in 2015, played in 8 games as a reserve as a freshman with his first career sack, then started 12 games as a sophomore, had 7.5 sacks and 9.5 tackles for loss, and started to explode in 2018, with 7.5 more sacks in 7 starts and 12 tackles for loss and 7.5 sacks again. And then last year he was a first-team All-American and All-Conference, which is Missouri Valley, and the Defensive Player of the Year in the conference with 48 tackles, 13.5 sacks, which was 6th best in the FCS level, 5 pass breakups, and 19 tackles for loss in 15 starts. So Derek Tuszka absolutely dominated his competition in almost every phase, whether it was stopping the run, on rare occasions when he'd have to cover against the pass, and when he'd rush the passer. And he notched just under 30 career sacks. He had 29 and a half. He was a primary starter for 3 different seasons. That's a lot of good things you like to see. He's a really good hand fighter. That's one of his most effective tools. He's an effective bull rusher. He's got a smooth punch to rip transition that makes it easier to shed blocks. He knocked down 5 passes just last season alone. He reminded me of Chase Winovich with the way that he just kind of never gives up on the play. He's one of those high motor players. He's not afraid of contact. He'll blast into offensive tackles and with impressive upper body strength that he uses to gain leverage, and he'll never be afraid to take on bigger running backs in the run game. And I really liked his tape overall. He had back-to-back sacks in a big game against South Dakota State in their final drive when North Dakota State was holding a 23-16 lead on the road. At the time, North Dakota State was the number 1 team in the nation, and South Dakota State was number 3. So that's not only a big game on the road, that's a rivalry game in the clutch. So he had back-to-back sacks there. That's about as clutch as it gets. But with the negatives with Derek Tuszka, this is obviously the big concern with guys that aren't at big Power 5 schools, especially with the FCS or lower, is that you're worried about their transition to the NFL. It's a bigger jump for them. So how is he going to perform? You're never super sure about that. Also, his arms are just 31 3/8 inches. That's what you might call alligator arms. That's not going to do you favors in the NFL. You're going to be fighting that your whole career. So he has a hard time shedding blocks from linemen with longer arms, especially tackles, obviously. And the longest arms on the field are usually going to come from your tackles. Also, Tuszka has tight hips and doesn't set a wide base. It's easy to knock him over if you hit him the right way. This affects him in several areas, the tight hips especially. He's has below average agility and change of direction speed. He lacks explosive acceleration or burst off the line of scrimmage and in pursuit. And it's easy to take him out of a play if he commits to one move too quickly because of how long it takes him to change direction. He also uses a spin move as a counter, which isn't awful in theory, but again, he takes so long to use it, it kind of defeats the purpose of trying it, and I saw that on tape. But overall with Derek Tuszka, he's a guy that you can fall in love with when you're watching his tape. He's a pretty solid athlete. He's got a high motor, never gives up on the play. He was productive in college, and he is technically sound, even though he's not a technician. There are concerns with his length, his level of competition. That's definitely something to be worried about. But there's no doubt in my mind that Derek Tuszka has the tools needed to be an NFL player, even if he's just a backup. He reminds me of an extremely light TJ Watt, obviously at a lower level too, when he was coming out. He won't be an electric player, but he's a guy I think most coaches would like to have on their team at the end of the day. I would be surprised if Tuszka isn't taken by the end of the 3rd round, but I could see him going as late as the 4th round possibly. But there's something here, I think. I watched his games against Butler, Northern Iowa, South Dakota State this past season, and the Shrine Bowl, obviously, this year. So that was my kind of mid-tier guy in Derek Tuszka from North Dakota State. I really liked what I saw from him. You've got 2 guys left. Who do you want to talk about? There's Curtis Weaver from Boise State and Tipa. Oh, I forgot about that name. I'll let you handle that.
The name is annoying. So let's just go with that. Let's go with Tipa Nalei. And I do apologize if I do mess it up. Every time I look at it, I want to say Galei, but it's Nalei. So if I do mess it up, I do apologize. It's just confusing that it's spelled with a G. Anyhow, he's from Utah State, and he's a senior. 6'5", 235 pounds. Tipa originally committed to Texas Christian back in 2015, but was unable to secure a starting role in either season while playing in 17 games total, and amassing 31 tackles, 5.5 being for a loss of 4.5 sacks. After his sophomore season, he was dismissed from school after being accused and later found guilty of assaulting 2 men in January 2017, which is why he was unable to participate in the combine. He transferred to Utah State, where his brother had played long snapper there from 2014 to 2015. He sat out the 2017 season, but returned to play in 2018, where he was able to secure the starting job for the Aggies, getting himself second-team All-Mountain West honors for his 64 tackles, a team-leading 14 for a loss. leading the conference in sacks with 10.5 and adding on 2 interceptions, 3 pass breakups, and 3 forced fumbles through 13 games. Tebow was again a second-team All-Mountain West Conference pick in 2019, having 55 tackles, 9 for a loss, and tying the team lead in sacks at 5. With no more years of eligibility left, he declared for the draft. So starting with his positives, when you watch his tape, the first thing you notice is pure explosion off the ball. He has a really good knack for timing off the snap, and then he has the acceleration to match, and this caused problems for slower tackles, like in his game against Michigan State in 2018. Both the sacks he got were from him just getting off the snap so quickly that the tackle wasn't able to adjust in time. His acceleration also helps make it really hard for quarterbacks to be able to escape, and also allows him to stride up the rush track. Now, combining his acceleration and speed with his length, and he could lock down the sidelines pretty well. It also helps that his fast feet come with agility, too. So he's all around a great athlete, and had he participated in the combine, he's expected to be one of the top performers. Continuing with this excellent footwork, he can use it for control for sudden cross-base shots on the inside, and he sinks his hands and feet to access some gaps against the run. Last two things are that he has a dangerous spin counter that I saw a couple times on tape. Wow, I can't speak today. It's very smooth, quick, and effective, and he also has the movement skills to drop back and offer some abilities in coverage. So the negative sides, now he's got the height, but his body type isn't right for the NFL. A slender body, skinny limbs, and long torso. He'll need to add at least 10 more pounds to get up to 245 if he wants to be a pass rusher in this league. At least in my opinion, because he's just not built for the point of attack. And scouts have even said they don't see him as an off-the-ball linebacker either, so it's not exactly ideal for him that he's not viewed as a pass rusher or off the ball. Now, my biggest takeaway from his tape is that he is terrible at making reads and keeping his eye on the football. So many times he was in the position to make a great play but couldn't find the ball and went after the wrong person. And due to the lack of tape, I only watched 2 games, and one he got hurt in the late third quarter, and I swear that this happened a lot, especially on mesh points against zone read. Then the power isn't there, and he tends to put his rush plan in neutral, and unfortunately doesn't have access to any real powers. He hasn't been able to turn his speed into power. Then he really struggles taking on blockers, failing to shed with any consistency while getting redirected off balance pretty easily when rushing the corner. With pursuit angles and getting tackles at times. Even if he was good in positioning, I saw him miss easier tackles more than once. So, a personnel director of an AFC team said, our analytics side has a physical profile for every position, and he isn't a fit at all, and we run an odd front, which is where he will have to play. There just aren't 227-pound rushers in the league. And to me, that's telling enough. He's up to 235 pounds now, but he needs to keep bulking and strong to be able to fit with NFL teams' schemes. Most people have him going somewhere between rounds 4 to 6, but to me, is round 7 or priority undrafted free agent. I definitely cannot see him going before round 6. I will be shocked if he goes before round 6. And even round 6, I think maybe a stretch for a guy marketing himself as an edge rusher, but couldn't beat the tight end Thad Moss one-on-one several times in his game against LSU. That's bad if you can't beat a tight end. How do you expect to beat NFL tackles? He literally only relied on speed in college. That's it. And there's still one big issue. He was kicked off the team in 2017 for assault. So to go along with his problems, he has character issues. To me, he just doesn't have a lot going for him. His team was completely unimpressive. His weight is an issue. His character is an issue. He didn't play against many high-ranking teams in his career. All he has going for him is his speed, his length, and he has the possibility of bulking up. And he has shown he might be able to cover. In all honesty, he might be the same chance rebranding. He might have the same chance making a team rebranding as a big safety instead. Cam Chancellor was 6'3" and 239 pounds coming out. And just before anyone yells at me for comparing to Cam Chancellor, may I remind you, was a 5th-round pick. So he wasn't expected to be great either. And I think Nalea is even faster. But to me, Nalea can't be a pass rusher in the NFL right now. So again, I think he's more likely to be undrafted than anything. But if he's drafted, it's probably in the 7th. And unfortunately for him, I wasn't able to watch much tape. I really wanted to watch him against Stony Brook. That's my school. Utah State destroyed Stony Brook this past season, 62-7. I tried desperately to find that, but obviously no one was making tape for that. But I still watched first LSU 2019, which I only got to watch 3/4 of it because he got injured in the end of the third quarter in that. Then I watched versus Michigan State in 2018, and then I watched 2 different highlight clips, which luckily had some different plays on them. But like, I just tried watching as much tape as I could. I couldn't find much on them. But yeah, that was Tipa Nalei from Utah State. Who was your next prospect?
Yeah, that's just an issue when you're looking at guys that aren't the top tier guys. You have trouble watching games. Like I'm not going to be looking at him this moment. I got one more player first, but excuse me, Ladarius Hamilton from North Texas. I was looking at his tape, and I only found one game from 2 years ago. I couldn't find anything from this year. It's hard sometimes.
Yeah, these smaller school guys that are late round prospects just don't get the same like tape because it's all done by people that just have personal interest on YouTube. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean the tape is out there, but these individual schools aren't going to give tape to nobodies like us.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but I digress. Anyhow, so I'm looking at the opposite of Alex Highsmith and Kendall Coleman from Syracuse, a guy I got the pleasure to watch play at Syracuse when they played Pittsburgh last season. That was actually one of the games I looked back on tape earlier when prepping for this show. So a little bit about Kendall Coleman. He was a 2-time All-State Indiana player in high school. He actually had a torn labrum, which I suffered the same injury when I was in high school. He suffered it during his senior season as a true freshman and started 11 of his 12 games in college his freshman year and had 1.5 tackles for loss, a sack, and a blocked kick. So he played relatively well with that torn labrum, so good for him. He started 8 games in 2017, missed 4 due to a foot injury, and actually considered walking away from the game after tearing his labrum again the following season, which he had 28 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. He did decide to return and started 12 games in 2018, teaming up with Alton Robinson on the other side to form a fearsome pass rushing duo, and finished second in the ACC with 10 sacks and 12 tackles for a loss. And then last year, he had 10 more tackles for loss and 2 sacks as a senior with 12 starts this past season. So there are a lot of good things you like about Kendall Coleman. He is truly one of those team guys, and he was an experienced player. He started games all 4 years at Syracuse. One of those guys that teammates and coaches love. He's a workaholic, and he's committed to improving himself on the field and committed to improving his craft. He offers an array of pass rushing moves, and he really is a technician with very skilled hand use. He used his starting experience to bait younger tackles into showing their hand early, faking a move one way and then darting to a different move. He was playing chess while the younger players were playing checkers. I've noticed that he didn't have anything overly dominant as far as his moves go on the outside. But when doubling to the inside, he seemed to do a good job of getting an anchor on the inside pass rushing moves. He does have a pretty solid spin move that I thought was okay. That's something I saw a lot of on tape. As far as the negatives with Kendall Coleman goes, he was the worst athlete I probably saw of the 4 prospects I looked at. He's slow off the ball. He's going to be negated easily by athletic linemen, and there were so many plays where he was just slow off the ball, and that's not something you want to see. He's not agile or agile enough for someone his size to play a 4-3 defensive end or 3-4 outside linebacker, but he's also not strong enough to be a 3-4 defensive end either. He takes too long to shed his blocks. He's not very rangy. He's lacking in length, and his lateral mobility is lacking, and he doesn't have the play strength desired to win at the point of attack. Really, just his physical tools are not good enough to match his great technique. So, when looking at a guy like Kendall Coleman in comparison to Alex Highsmith, it's like I've said several times. Coleman is a low ceiling, high floor type of guy. So his athletic limitations, his burst, length, and strength are going to keep him from being a top-level guy. But his work ethic, smart football mind, and technique are going to give him a chance in the NFL. If not as an edge rusher, then I think he'd be a good, if not great, special teams player. He should be a probably a late day 3 selection. I definitely would not hate having him on my team as a special teams guy. So be on the lookout for him possibly. I watched his games at Liberty against Clemson, Pittsburgh this year, and the Shrine Bowl this year as well. So Kendall Coleman from Syracuse, talk to me about your last prospect.
Before I talk about Curtis Weaver, there's one thing I literally kept telling myself, don't forget it. There's one more thing about Tipa Nalei that I forgot to say. He also has long snapping abilities. He hosts a camp with his brother in the summers to teach long snapping, and he can be a long snapper. So that was something I wanted to mention. Forgot to write it down. I was like, I'll remember when we talk about him, and I didn't. But anyway, Curtis Weaver from Boise State. He's a junior, 6'2" and 265. Not very often that a California athlete doesn't stay at home and go to one of the big schools there, but Weaver decided to leave Long Beach and take his talents to Boise State, where he redshirted his first season. In the next season, he came on strong, earning himself an all-conference pick and freshman All-American honors after ranking 6th in the FBS in sacks with 11, while having 33 tackles, 13 being for loss, and 1 interception. In 2018, he was a first-team All-Mountain West pick again after leading his team in tackles for loss with 15, having 9.5 sacks and 43 tackles through 13 starts. 2019 was his best season by far, though, and the recognition was definitely there as he earned himself second-team Associated Press All-American, first-team All-Conference, and Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year, and he was a Ted Hendricks Award finalist, which is given to the top defensive end in the country. All this was for his 18.5 tackles for loss, 13.5 sacks, 52 total tackles, an interception, and 3 pass breakups. Following his best season, he declared for the draft. So what's good about him is, surprisingly, he's actually pretty nimble in coverage for a guy his size. Really, it's a combination of some surprising fluidity and agility, which was good enough to get him a top 5 performance at 3-cone drill at the Combine. Then he also showed a lot of football IQ with some really good play recognition, which allowed him to be ahead of his opponent. Then as a pass rusher, that good IQ carries over, and he plays with good instincts with his rush counters. Also, when it comes to his pass rushing, he's been a heavy producer behind the line over the past 3 seasons because he plays with his hands and feet working together. He can create rush momentum with his acceleration to his rush arc, can play slick and seamless around blocks while also looking past the blockers, and has quick lateral reactions to cross-face blockers. Last thing is, he could be a heavy hitter as a tackler sometimes. He walloped some guys on tape a few times. Not always, but when it was, appropriate. Negatives. So when you watch his tape, the first thing you'll notice is that he is big, but, not in a good way. His body looks bulky, and he has a soft frame. This leads him to be slow as all heck. He didn't run the 40 at the Combine for good reason, as there's no doubt in my head he would have been a bottom 5 performer for linebackers. He also lacks the hustle. Again, he is probably at too high of a weight class for his height, but when he's on the backside of plays, there's close to no hustle at all. Here's the worst part of all this. The weight absolutely does not turn into strength, which is why he also didn't participate in the bench press, because his weight isn't muscle weight. He's really going to have to work on his physique getting into the NFL. Anyhow, the strength is lacking everywhere, and you can see it in both his punching and also his balance, where he doesn't have a strong base. Then when he's getting blocked, he allows himself to be sealed by play-side run blocks and ducks his head a lot when taking on blocks. Last thing is, he lacks pursuit speed, and the game against Florida State was terrible for him. There was a play where he was 5 yards in front of a guy on a double reverse, and he recognized it early because he has good play IQ. And the guy was able to beat him to the perimeter and get in front of him when he had a 5-yard head start. Actually, there's a couple more things to talk about his tape, I realized. Firstly, he really struggled against both Washington and Colorado State's O-line, which was disappointing. And also, he seemed to miss quite a few tackles, especially in the Florida State game, but no one really seemed to recognize his missed tackles as a negative when I was looking at some other things. But anyhow, overall, I actually have a comparison for his play style. It reminds me of Jalen Ferguson, the edge rusher from Louisiana Tech that I looked at last year. This, unfortunately, is not a good thing. I hated Ferguson, though I thought he was completely overrated, often being considered a second-round pick. And I said he should be a fourth-round selection. And that was for a player that was taller, had longer arms, and had longer arms than Weaver. So, now a lot of people have mocked Weaver to the Steelers in the 3rd round, but I honestly view him as a 5th-rounder. I can't get past all the physique issues, and the tape I saw was massively disappointing because of it. I'll say if he gets it all together, he could be a steal, but that's a lot, and I'm not sure what that will ever happen. So again, I wouldn't draft Weaver until round 5. That's what he projects to me. I mean, I could see a team taking him late round 4, but I wouldn't do that either. I think that overall he just really suits best as a round 5 prospect. And I watched his highlights versus Washington 2019, versus Florida State 2019, and on a coin flip I watched versus Colorado State in 2019 instead. So that was my last prospect. So do you want to rank your prospects now?
I actually have one more guy to look at.
I'm sorry.
No,
I forgot I started.
It's all good, man. I'm finishing up with Ladarius Hamilton from North Texas at 6'2" and 262 pounds. Hamilton was Conference USA All-Freshman in 2016 as he played in 13 games. Didn't have really any notable stats that year. He became a primary starter in 8 of 14 games in 2017 with 40 tackles. And then he burst onto the scene in 2018 with first-team All-Conference USA selection with 33 tackles and 11 tackles for loss and 7.5 sacks in 13 games with 11 starts. And then last year he was an honorable mention All-Conference USA with 8.5 sacks, 10.5 tackles for loss, and 12 starts with 39 tackles. As far as the positives with him go, he was versatile. So one thing that I didn't realize at first is that he was primarily used in odd fronts, 3-4 fronts, as a defensive end, as a 3-4 defensive end, and occasionally was used as an interior defensive lineman in sub packages, along with heavy use as an edge rusher in passing situations. So that's kind of interesting. He had good production that really ramped up over his last 2 years. He's got a broad chest and wide hips that create a naturally wider base. Because of that, he's got a good anchor and a powerful pop at the point of attack. He sets the edge well on runs inside when asked to do so, and he played the run well in general as an interior guy too. He has multiple speed rushes that he uses to complement each other. Think of a lightning quick approach and then a slower counter to change it up. He has strong hands, and he plays physical. Another guy that never really gives up on the play from what I saw. The negatives, though, he doesn't really have good burst off the line of scrimmage at all. It's pretty bad. He's slow at diagnosing plays. He was fooled by draws, counters, fakes, and probably would be fooled by trick plays too. Pad level's too high. He doesn't have that natural dip around the arc on the outside. He struggles with athletic linemen on outside runs when lined up on the edge, and he struggled to finish sack. There were 2 sacks that he should have had against Arkansas in 2018 that he didn't get a chance to finish. That limited agility and athleticism of his is going to hinder his range as far as tackling goes. And despite his versatility in college, kind of like, what was his name? Tipa?
Malai.
Yeah, kind of like him. I believe you said that was he the guy that you said doesn't really have a natural fit anywhere?
Yeah, that is exactly who I said doesn't have a natural fit anywhere.
Yeah, that's kind of how it's projecting here for Hamilton. He's not big enough to be an interior defensive lineman. He's not big enough to be even a 3-4 defensive end. He kind of has to be an edge rusher, but he's not an overly big or agile one either. So there's kind of issues all around. So there are concerns there overall. But I came away from Ladarius Hamilton's tape pretty impressed given what I had read about him, even though it was a small sample size. He is limited athletically, but I do like his work ethic and toughness. His tape against Arkansas really stood out in a positive light. He's not likely to contribute on the defensive side of the ball for his career. And I do have his questions about his viability as a special teams player due to his lack of tackling range. But I definitely don't think that it would be a bad idea to take a look at him as an undrafted free agent. Certainly a guy I think that could be a priority UDFA. So a name to keep your eye out for if the Steelers don't end up drafting one. So definitely keep your eye on Ladarius Hamilton. Again, I saw just his YouTube highlights and Arkansas tape from 2018. Hard to find tape on him. So those are the 8 edge rusher prospects we looked at, Austin. I looked at guys that were kind of like 4 different tiers, if you will. I had a day 2 guy, a late day 2, an early day 2, a mid day 3, and then probably an undrafted guy. I'll rank them. I really like Derek Tuska. I liked his tape a lot. He's got that great motor, work ethic, and he's got decent technical skills right now. I think he's got a lot to build on. It'll probably just take some time with the jump from the FCS level, but I think he has a future. Second, I have Kendall Coleman. He's probably never going to be a guy that plays a ton of snaps on defense. He's got a limited upside, but late in the draft, I think he could be kind of an Anthony Chickalo replacement, and he's a guy that's got a good makeup and he's a good team player. If you're looking for a low ceiling guy, I think Kendall Coleman's a pretty safe bet, so I like him next. Third, I have Ladarius Hamilton. He's good as an undrafted free agent, but he's probably not going to be much more than a special teams player, but you're not sacrificing much to get him if you're not using a draft pick. And then finally, I have Alex Highsmith, the opposite of Kendall Coleman. I didn't hate his tape. I just wasn't as big on it as I was with the other players. He could still be a solid rotational rusher within the next couple of years, but I think he also has bust potential too, since we don't know that he could be sacrificing his explosiveness by adding bulk. If it were a different situation where the Steelers needed pass rushers right now, I'd consider it just because he is a very good athlete, but I just don't think it's needed necessarily at this point. So that's why I ranked my 4 players the way I did. I did like all of them, though.
So for me, I kind of showed my hand a little bit. I at least gave away my first person because I called him my first draft love. But it's got to go to Darrell Taylor. I love the value. I love the tape. He doesn't have a lot of starting experience. He doesn't have a lot of game under his belt because of that. But, I mean, I loved his toughness. I loved finding out that he had played through a fracture in his foot. And I was watching him pass rush, and I'm like, wow, he's got really good bend, and he's got really good stuff like that. And it's like a lot of that requires foot strength, like to plant your foot and to use it to get power around the edge. And I was impressed with that. And then just, again, finding out about the injury that he needed surgery for that, I was just like, wow, like that guy's tough as heck. I'm not sure he fits with the Steelers because of the character issues. But I would probably reorder this list if I'm doing fit for Steelers. I'm going by how I like them, and I think Darrell Taylor showed me the best tape, and I think that he's going to be a steal for whatever team takes him. He might be a future Cowboy or Bengal with his character issues, but after that was Zach Baun. Baun was an interesting one. I just wasn't in love with his tape. I think that because pass rushers are hard to come by, his value wasn't there for me, being like an early second round pick. And like I said, I even saw him. It was the first mock that I had seen him in the first round, but he was mocked in the first round to the Green Bay Packers just recently. I think that I would like him more if he fell into the third round. I think I'd be ecstatic actually, because the value was just not there. If Zach Baun was available in the third round, I would 100% be happy with that. But I think he's going to go in the second round. Then after him was Curtis Weaver. I just wasn't a fan of Weaver's tape at all. This is the second one. After being disappointed with Steelers fans with Zach Moss, now I'm disappointed again with Steelers fans with Curtis Weaver. This was rough. I think I dislike Curtis Weaver more than I did Zach Moss, which is unfortunate. There's no motor there. I really hate the lack of speed. He's a little bit too heavy. He doesn't have a good frame. I guess that's why people like him. They think he can work into someone that's great. But to me, I would be okay if the Steelers took him in the fifth. But where his current value is would be a waste of a pick, in my opinion. I think that he doesn't provide third round value right away. He provides fifth round value. So I'm not exactly a fan of his. And that leaves Tipa Galeai last. I can't get a read on how he's going to be an edge rusher in the NFL. His value is 100% not there. I have been right before about value, where I actually think of a guy that was projected in the same round. So Tipa was projected between rounds 4 and 6. Kevin Gibbons, the defensive tackle I looked at last year from Penn State, was also given that same rounds projection, 4 to 6. And I said the same exact thing, that this dude is 7 or undrafted free agent, and I happened to be right about that. Kevin Gibbons became an undrafted free agent. I feel like I'm going to be right here again. If I were to I think I could put money down that Tipa Galeai is not going to go where his value says, and I just don't think he fits with the Steelers. He has extreme character issues. I said Darrell Taylor had issues because he fought with a teammate and kicked him in the face in practice. I mean, Nalea just got arrested back in 2017 for assaulting a dude. So, I mean, take that as you may. I just don't see how anyone could draft Nalea when he doesn't have a position right now. To me, he can't come out as an edge rusher. I think he's just be fun for Camp to take in and see if he could do something else. I can't see him lasting with a team very long at all. So that's how I ordered my list.
Alrighty then. Let's move into Steelers news. So, according to Ed Bouchette of The Athletic, Ben Roethlisberger said that he was going to be ready for OTAs and minicamp in at least a limited fashion. With the COVID-19 situation affecting society all over the world and this country, obviously, Roethlisberger is deciding now to take a step back in his recovery a little bit slower since there's now no definite end date to this social distancing period that would likely keep off-season workouts from happening anyway. So now, Roethlisberger said he's going to take a step back and slow down. He said that he thinks he's about 60% of where he wants to be at this point. So, good news, yeah?
That's good. He's on schedule, which is good. I mean, I hope he's at 100% by the time the season rolls around, if season rolls around on time anyway.
As far as NFL news goes, the big thing today was that the All-Decade team was announced, and one current Steeler and former Steeler made the team. Center Marquise Pouncey and former Steelers receiver Antonio Brown made the team. Those were the big Steelers ones. I don't know if you have thoughts on those.
I didn't really have much thoughts on the All-Decade team. I didn't have many complaints. I thought that the list was somewhat good. Maybe David DeCastro could have made it, but overall, I was pretty happy with the list. I didn't have many complaints.
There were 8 unanimous selections. On offense, it was Tom Brady at quarterback, Adrian Peterson at running back, Joe Thomas at tackle, and Marshall Yanda at guard. And on defense, J.J. Watt at defensive end, Aaron Donald at defensive tackle, and Von Miller at linebacker. I think that's pretty fair.
I think all of those are pretty fair.
Oh, I forgot about Justin Tucker at kicker, too.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense as well.
Can't forget about that, because he was obviously very darn good, too. Anyhow, Anyway, speaking of Antonio Brown, he just hired veteran agent Ed Wyszewski, I believe is how you say. Wyszewski? Oh, I don't know how to say that. Anyways,
Mike Wazowski.
Mike Wazowski of EMG Sports in the hopes of returning to the NFL this season. After videos on social media surfaced of Brown working out with his cousin Marquise and Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens, there had been speculation that he could be aiming for an opportunity to play with the Ravens, but according to ESPN, Ravens GM Eric DeCosta declined to comment if the Ravens were interested in him. Do you have any thoughts?
No, not really. I mean, he's going to be looking for any opportunity. If Buffalo comes calling right now, he would probably hop on it this time. He's going to look for any and every opportunity. I'm sure that his cousin is putting in the best words he can with the Ravens, trying to get him there. And he would fit well with the Ravens. The Ravens need some more wide receivers, so it would be a good signing for them. Terrible for us.
No, he wouldn't. Yeah. He wouldn't fit in well anywhere because he's Antonio Brown.
To make a good point, he would work his way out as soon as he got to wherever he got.
Although I'm sure you could delude yourself into thinking that he'd be okay for the time being, given the fact that he's with his cousin there.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyhow, the Los Angeles Rams COO Kevin Demoff said that the Rams have no plans to move away from their new logos and colors, despite the nearly unanimous criticism and negative reception of the new logos. According to ESPN, even former Rams legend Eric Dickerson met with the front office representing the fans that were unhappy with the rebranding, and the front office stuck to their guns. I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think it's kind of dumb. I mean, some guy edited their logo in 10 minutes and made it like 100% better. And like a lot of people took it and like did their own edits and made it look way better. I'm not a big fan of the new logo. I don't hate it as much as like everyone else does, but I mean, I think that they could have done better. I think it was lazy.
I like the colors. I like that they moved back to the royal blue and yellow. I think that's pretty sharp, but I'm not crazy about the logo.
Yeah, the logo isn't great.
Anyhow, the other biggest news from today is that the NFL confirmed its draft will be held via a virtual format with the team personnel working from their homes. The guidelines sent from the league office includes a mandate of no groups or gatherings. All team facilities were closed on March 26th and March 26th, and Roger Goodell has ordered them to remain closed indefinitely as we lead up to the draft. So, kind of what we expected all along, but it is reality now.
The no gatherings was a little bit crazy to me. I mean, I understand that we really had to social distance, but up until this point, I was under the impression that, yeah, like the team would have their like GM, their coach, and like one other person, like a personnel person, like together to at least be in the room to talk about it. Now it's just like one guy gets to do all the drafting. There's either going to be like 80 trades this year or 0 trades, like because you're going to have to get your like advisors on the phone and stuff like that. It's just going to be such a pain. I don't know. This sucks. They're doing everything besides the postponing the draft. I feel like they should. We're reaching the peak this week. Why not just postpone it 2 more weeks, and have the draft then? Because then by then we might be allowed to have gatherings of 10 or less people by then. I don't know. If we truly are reaching the peak this week, it's just. To me, it seems like way better just delay the draft.
Well, the thing is, you're reaching the peak in New York, not necessarily other places.
I thought that we were reaching the peak all over. Right?
Well, that's because New York City has the most people, so they'll reach their peak first. But like where I am, we're not going to reach our peak for a couple weeks after that, most likely.
That makes more sense. All right, I retract my statement.
In any case. What was I going to say? I wouldn't hate it being pushed back just because, for selfish reasons, I want to look at more players, you know?
Yeah. Be fun to look at way more players. 2 weeks opens up a lot of time.
It really does. And to be honest with you, that's all I'd want is just 2 weeks. I'm just saying. And the other thing is, depending on how long this goes on, I mean, I guess we'll have plenty of time to look at other players anyways, just to find something to do. I don't know, but now I'm just wondering aloud. So, in any case, that's all for today. Unless if there's something else you wanted to say, Austin, I think we're all set.
Oh, I'm good. I mean, we're still there's just some big free agents still sitting around. Like Jadeveon Clowney hasn't signed anywhere. Eli Apple's deal with the Raiders fell through. There's another top guy that doesn't have. Who?
Cam Newton and Jameis Winston are still out there, unfortunately, because,
Steelers haven't picked up Jameis Winston yet. Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, so.
Obviously, we're going to sign him for $22 million as soon as possible. We just haven't gotten him on the plane yet.
Mm-hmm.
But, so there's still a few free agents out there, big ones.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about Clowney? His asking price is coming down. I didn't really realize this season was such a disappointment this year. He only had like 4 sacks. Like, he kind of sucked.
The Seahawks pass rush was one of the worst. I mean, the Seahawks are still open to taking him back, but like the market isn't there. That's why he's still a free agent.
I mean, would you want to pay $17 million to a guy that had 4 sacks last year?
Oh no! Hell no!
I always thought he was overrated. Anyways, I hated him coming out of South Carolina.
Because they only had one play that went on the highlights every time they talked to him.
Yeah, we've talked about that, and that's not his fault. But, I mean, it's ESPN's fault. But as far as I knew, that was the only play. That could have been his only collegiate snap. That's all I ever knew, you know? So how could I take him seriously? And to his credit, he's turned out to be a really talented player. I don't know if he's necessarily fit the billing of the overall top pick, but he's had a solid NFL career. But I still think he's overrated.
I agree. I'm not a big fan of his.
So, anyhow. So that was our edge defenders. We'll hopefully be back later this week talking about tight ends. I know the Steelers added Eric Ebron, so I think the possibility of the Steelers adding a tight end has greatly diminished in this draft. But we had a bunch of guys that we wanted to look at, so we're going to do that. So I'm looking forward to tight end. And tight end has produced some of my favorite personal prospects over the years, and T.J. Hockenson and George Kittle. Not looking at any Iowa tight ends this year, sadly. Although Nate Wheating is available to be drafted, but I'm not going to be looking at him this year. But tight ends are fun to watch.
Man, it's going to be exciting.
So, all right. In the meantime, if you have any questions about the show, please feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. And check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. You can check out our episodes from there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. And Austin, thank you for joining me. Everyone, continue to wash your hands, practice social distancing, and be safe out there. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast.
Good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.